In this segment, we're going to give you an example of a high velocity, low amplitude technique directed to the thoracic spine. We're going to start out in this segment with a type 1 dysfunction, patient supine position. And our dysfunction is going to be mid-thoracic. We'll say it's a T7 as an example. T7, neutral, side bent right, rotated left. In terms of the doctor's positioning, if you determine the side of the rotational component, in this case left, that means the doctor for this technique would stand on the patient's right. There are a number of hand positions that you can place the patient into in terms of their arms approximating on their chest like this versus putting their hands behind their neck and some others, but we're going to just show you a standard positioning. This might change if you have a female patient versus female physician, etc. And you can talk about that in the lab sessions themselves and see what works best for you. What I do generally is get the patient to form a V with one arm on top of the other like this, not a W or an X or anything, so that the elbows line up. Putting the top arm over, the top arm being the side of the rotational component, because this will take the scapula and move it out laterally so that you can get to the segment in which you're interested. And take your hand back on the shoulder and roll the patient off the table, and then try, from your palpation, you'll come down to the segment. In this case, it was a T7, so we're going to find our T6 and 7 spinous processes. Since it's T7, our transverse process will be a half step up or so towards the head, because the spinous process hangs below, and I get on the transverse process. At this point, I then take my thenar eminence and place it over the patient's transverse process, take my hand perpendicularly across the spine, leaving a little cupping of my hand so I don't put too much pressure on the spinous process, and then bring the patient down. Now, in this case, you can control the patient's arm and their chest by placing your abdomen so that you place the patient's elbows below your xiphoid process into your upper abdominal area so you don't break your own ribs. And now you can control the patient's rotation. So now as I roll the patient with my abdominal wall towards the left, towards my thenar eminence, I can lock onto that prominent or that posteriorly prominent T7 rotated left transverse process. So now my thenar eminence is pushing back into the transverse process, forcing it to the right. So that'll take care of that rotation left by moving it to the right. Now, lift your head up. I can then cup my patient's head like this and get down here and control him down here rather than with his head. I don't want to flex his head too much. I'm just trying to lift his upper back off. And because he's side bent right, rotated left, the thenar eminence is rotating into the right barrier. I could increase my positioning a little bit by side bending the patient using this top hand to the left. So now I have a little bit of side bending left coming down. I can feel that under my thenar eminence. And then there's my pressure right over my thenar eminence. So now I can feel that I have the pressure there, everything's set, and I ask the patient to take a deep breath. And as he exhales, I just add a little rotatory movement over that transverse process like that, and let the patient down, and then I'll reevaluate the patient through the parameters we used to find the initial somatic dysfunction in the first place.